Okay, Jen, we're going to be going in about a minute, okay? Okay. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. My name is Francesca Dubrock, and I'm the Chief Curator at the Anchorage Museum, and I'd like to start us out with a little land acknowledgement. So if you could please just close your eyes and place your feet on the floor and imagine down beneath the carpet or concrete or the wood to the ground beneath you. And just take a moment to breathe and to give thanks for that ground that's holding you up. In Anchorage, this is the land of the Eklutna Dena'ina. We offer our thanks to the generations of Indigenous peoples who have stewarded this land that we call home. So with that, I'll say thank you. Thank you again for joining us. I'm here today in the studio with Jennifer Angaiak Wood, who is our current artist in residence. She is an artist of Yupik, Irish, and Italian descent and was born and raised in Fairbanks, Alaska. The Yupik side of her family comes from Tanunuk, Alaska, on the coast of the Bering Sea. Jennifer started carving masks when she took an Alaska Native art class in high school and has been mostly self-taught after the unexpected passing of her teacher, Ron Manouk. Since moving to the Seattle area in 2015, she has met and worked with other artists who are helping her learn to use more traditional tools such as bent knives and adzes. Jennifer's inspirations include historic masks, stories, and her time spent in Tanunuk growing up. She usually adds modern materials and concepts to her work, and she uses her art as a way to connect with her Yupik heritage and bring a little piece of Yupik history into the modern world. She has recently expanded her art practice to include printmaking, though masks are her primary means of artistic expression. So we're obviously super lucky to have Jen with us this afternoon. I just want to note that these studio sharing events are meant to be super informal and casual and an opportunity for audiences to ask whatever questions they have for the artist. So, you know, no question is too basic or straightforward. Jen's happy to talk about her tools and techniques and her background and her interests and how she balances art making with child rearing. You can ask her anything. I just ask you to type your questions out in the chat and I will read them to Jen as she's carving. And I think she'll be working on a small carving for us today, but she'll also be sharing the larger mask that she's been making over the course of the month with you all. And I just want to also note and give gratitude to the Siri Foundation, who has funded this program and who are so delighted to partner with to bring you these virtual artist residencies. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jen.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining us and watching this after the fact if you're not here live. But I wanted to show a little bit of the actual carving process. So through Instagram, I've been documenting the carving of this mask, which is out of alder. It started out as a green piece of alder, which just means it was still wet. And then it has to dry out. And so this has actually been sitting on my heat vent for the last 3 or 4 days. So every time the heat kicks on, it blasts right into the back of the mask and helps dry it out. It needs a little bit more time. One thing I wanted to show for people who've been keeping track is you can see a crack right there, right there. And actually this is smaller than it was yesterday. One of the things that I found about carving alder is that during the drying process, for me at least, it cracks almost every time. And the first time I used it, I texted a friend of mine in an absolute panic, and she said, "Oh, it'll close back up when it's dry." And so sure enough, every time it starts closing up. So this will probably take another day or two to dry before I finish it. And even though January is my residency month with the Anchorage Museum, I will be continuing documenting this as I finish it up. But for today, I wanted to do some work on just a small mask. This is super, super tiny. I was just telling Francesca that I was gonna do a larger hand-sized one with this piece of wood, but I forgot until late last night that I had broken the blade on my bandsaw to cut out the mask. So I didn't have time to replace it, but luckily I had these just sitting in a drawer. It was an idea I had many years ago and never got around to doing it. So I'll just be showing some of the process because I know it doesn't necessarily make sense if you've never done it. These are my usual tools. And it's a set of file chisels that my parents got me way back in the day. These are obviously too big for this little piece. And so I'm going to be using these smaller, these are called palm tools. They just have pieces of hose. I don't have a case for these, so one of my teachers years ago said, "I'll get some piece of rubber hose and then push it in there and then squeeze it together with some tape." So that's how I've done this. These are super sharp. A lot of printmakers use these for wood prints and lino cuts, or wood cut and lino cut prints. And they cut really well for that. And then obviously they work really well for these as well. And each of these have a different blade that I can use. And then the other one I use is, this is a bent knife from this area. I live in Indianola, Washington now, so I'm on the traditional lands of the Suquamish people, as well as there's many other tribes in the area. But since I've moved down here, a friend has been teaching me how to use these. She let me borrow these a while ago, and I haven't given them back yet. But someday I hope to learn how to make these on my own. Yeah, so I'll just get started. First with this tool. It has a, oh, sorry, I'm not used to this live streaming angle, but it has just a very slight bend. So the first thing I'll be doing is just shaping it. Conveniently enough, it's a whale design, similar to, or thematically similar to the piece I've been working on. So the first thing I'll do is I'll just carve away the outside. So I'm left with what I call the mask blank, which is the overall shape without any of the face carving on it. And so this part can go pretty quick. I don't need to be really careful. One thing I've learned about carvers down here is they do a lot of measuring and pre-planning for co-salish design and for form line design. I don't do that. Mine's a lot more free form and kind of just goes with whatever happens with the wood.
Jen, I wanted to ask a question. I know you're working on a small piece of wood right now, but one thing I noticed watching your documentation of the larger mask you carved this month was just how huge the initial piece of wood you are working with is. So I'm just curious if you could talk a little bit like how big is usually a piece of wood you're working with to make a mask that is more or less at a human proportion?
So this one, it's a little larger than human proportion. But the log this came off of was probably, so this is about 4 inches deep. And the log that this came off of was probably, I'm trying to remember what it looked like. It's probably 14 inches across. So when you get the log or your piece of your round of wood, you can use a splitting maul to cut it in half, or roughly in half. So that would have been 7 inches. So this original piece was about 7 inches across. I took off some of the front before I even started carving this to even out the natural form of the log. And then while I was carving this, I realized that the back was really uneven, so I took off another inch from the back of just solid wood. And then, of course, since it's hollow, all of this had to come out too. So I end up with a piece. This one I left a little bit thicker because the wood was really wet, and I didn't want it to crack all the way through when it dried. So this is probably maybe 1/2 inch to 3/4 inch all the way around. And it was quite a bit heavier than it is now. So it does, there are days I just feel like all I'm doing is making a pile of wood chips. Like I'm not making anything. So it's a challenge to kind of imagine what it'll look like and how much I have to take away. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thanks. It's just, a kind of an aspect of making your work that I hadn't considered, how physical it is, how big these pieces of wood are that you're working with.
Yeah, there are days I'm pretty worn out and sore by the end. By the time I'm done working on them. I try to only work as long as I'm staying focused, because when I start losing focus, I start making mistakes. So there's been days I can kind of plug away for maybe 5 or 6 hours. And then I feel I have to like unfold myself because I've been crouched over this whole time. So it gets pretty physical. And then in the summertime when it's hot, hopefully you have a cooler place to work.
Absolutely. Yeah, I didn't mean to stop you from carving there.
Oh no, you're fine.
Yeah. So we have a question from the audience here. Charlene would like to know, how do you select the wood you work with?
So if that's Charlene DiFilippo, hello.
Yes, that is her.
Awesome. She's a good friend of mine. So part of it now that I used to only carve with basswood. That's what I learned with when I was in high school. Maybe a little more space here. But since I have moved down here, I also use yellow cedar and red cedar, and then alder. And then yew wood is another one that's popular down here. I haven't used that yet. And so part of it is whatever's available. If I have an idea and I have whatever wood on hand, then I'll just use that. But if I have a choice, then it depends on the details that I'm going to be working on. So something like this mask, which has that, I wanted to get sort of sharper angles on the forehead. This would be harder to do with, or for me at least, it's harder for me to do something like red cedar. The layers compress a little bit more, and I haven't quite figured out the technique for that. And so for this kind of detail, I'd want to use either alder or yellow cedar, which carves really nicely. And basswood is sort of hit and miss. Sometimes you get a really good piece and you can get good detail, and sometimes it's a little dry and it tears. So you want to look for a piece, like if you're looking for green wood, you want to look for something that doesn't have any noticeable knots or branches coming off of it. and one that is still kind of healthy. Like around here, trees will fall for all sorts of reasons. Like it's been raining a lot, and so they'll fall down in wind because the ground is so loose. But then, of course, sometimes they fall down because they're dying or diseased. And those I have found those don't work really well. They get kind of soft and mushy in spots. But I'm not picky. Yupik people used to use driftwood, whatever came down the mighty Yukon River into the Kuskokwim, into my dad's region. So if I always laugh that a lot of the wood I find is off the side of the road. I go, oh, there's an alder, and I pull over and I grab pieces of it.
Yeah, I was wondering about the alder that you carved the larger mask from. You said it was a fallen tree, and I was like, oh, I wonder if that was at her house or how she found it.
No, my friend Randy actually texted me and said, hey, there's a really nice alder on the side of the road. Come and get some.
That's great.
I met her there, and it had already been bucked up into rounds, and so she helped me roll them into the back of my car.
That's great. Okay, so we have another question from Annette. She says, knowing you and the career path you originally took, what moment or time in your life did you realize that you needed this change and let your art take you on this path?
Oh, man. Yeah, Annette's known me for a long time. We used to work at the riverboat in Fairbanks together. And I was 19 when I started working there, so maybe 20 or 21 when I met her. And I was I did a bunch of random jobs for a while, and then I was a teacher for 10 years. And I think one of the big things was that this desire to create art was kind of always in the back of my mind. And honestly, part of the reason I stopped carving was because of the death of Mr. Minook. Those of us who knew him, it was really hard because it was unexpected. We didn't, it felt like it was just sort of a blow to the chest. We didn't, he passed from an aneurysm, and so of course no one expected it. And some people know this story, but it's one that I feel more comfortable sharing as I get older. But back in 2000, maybe 11 or 12, I had a dream actually that I was at a house that there was a lot of people at, and everyone was just kind of milling around, and I walked down into the basement, and in that dream, Minook was walking up the stairs, and I stopped, and even in my dream, I knew that he had passed away, and I said, Minook, what are you doing here? I thought you died. And he looked at me and said, I did, but I came back to tell you you need to get back to work. So I took that as a message that I should start carving again. And so I took a few tentative steps, did a few simple pieces, and it's just kind of gone from there. I actually hadn't intended to stop teaching a couple of years ago, but just some things happened at the staffing wise at the school I was at. I was also really exhausted from being an English teacher and coming home to two kids. My kids were 3 and 5 at the time. So it actually worked out that I ended up not working that year. And I just kept, it was slow going at first, but I just kind of kept plugging away, making work. My friend Randy and I started carving together and spending more time together, just talking shop, and she doing her kind of work and me doing mine. And it's all come to this where I feel really fortunate that I'm able to share my work and be able to do shows and residencies like this So it's all just been kind of, slow but steady over time.
Wow, that is a really powerful story and experience you had with that dream. Thank you for sharing. I want to just ask that a viewer is commenting they're having a hard time seeing. So if you could move your hand a little more underneath the camera as you're working. Susie's trying to look at what you're doing.
I'm not savvy with the ways of technology. I could never make a living from TikTok.
No, you're doing a great job. You're doing wonderful. Charlene says, who's chopping onions here? I love that story. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Char.
Yeah, that was beautiful. Annette says, Riverboat Discovery Reunion. I'm just going to read you some of the love coming through. And then Jessica says, Jen, your work is so amazing. I have a beautiful mask you made. And I think about all of the knowledge that is embedded within that mask and the spirit within the mask.
Awesome. Thank you, Jess.
And this is a great one from Melissa. Not a question, more of a comment. I hadn't realized how much I missed hearing Jen's voice and seeing her awesome dimples. I'm so excited to see your work.
Thank you, Mo. I was just talking with someone how growing up I hated my dimples because that's all anyone would talk about, and like when I was little, and so I actually used to try to not smile in front of people. But I'm kind of a natural smiler, like everything makes me laugh. So that was hard for me to do.
I bet. Yeah, so I'll just remind our viewers, you can type any questions you have for Jen in the chat. I guess I'll follow up a little bit on what you were talking about, Jen, with your teaching and your making work and kind of how you got back into it. Because this isn't something we talked about in our interview, but I'm curious about, what the process of being an artist is like while also raising kids and having the busy life that you do.
Man, that's probably been sort of the area where I've really had to change and grow the most. Because I want to be really present with my kids and make sure they know. Sorry, I'll keep doing camera check-ins. But make sure that they know that art is just kind of a part of me, and it's something that I just feel I need to partake in, but it's not more important than they are. So for a while, the only time I ever had to work was at night after they went to bed. But now that they're getting older, they'll come and check in. My daughter is showing a lot of interest in the process. She really likes drawing her own masks. Her own mask designs, and they're really sweet because they always have like hearts for the eyes and moons and stars. But she always has a universe ring. That's the rings around Yupik masks, and like little attachments coming off of them. So as they've gotten older, and I've gotten better at managing my time, it's been really fun to have them join me a little bit. I did one mask where I did the carving, but I wasn't sure what or how I wanted to finish it. And so I asked my son, okay, is this a universe or is this a galaxy, or is this a whirlpool in the water? And he looked at it and thought for a little bit, and he goes, it's a galaxy. And so that's how I finished it. I added some constellations and some like shimmery watercolor paint. And so hopefully that'll keep developing in that direction. Obviously it's not perfect in any way. And sometimes I just have to make a decision. If I have a deadline coming up, obviously, I have to work on that stuff. But sometimes I just realize that they need me, and so I just have to put everything down for a little while and just be okay with that.
Jen, I wonder if you could, was the knife you were using just prior to what you have now, the tool you have now, is that the bent knife?
Yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about what makes that tool different and kind of how you use it?
Yeah, so the on these tools, on these small chisels, the cutting edge is flat to or like off the front, and the on the bent knife, and you can get these in all different shapes. I'll show you a couple of others. The cutting edge is on the side, and it has a slight angle. You can get these straight as well, but you can get a different angle. So like when I come in to like this area, see if I can, if you can kind of see that outline there, there's like sort of like a fin design right here. So I'm going to separate that off from the mask. So I could either use this and just sort of plane that off, or I could come in along this line here and do one line like that. You can kind of see it poking out. And then come back up the other side. You can see that piece of wood start separating away. So you can get really fine lines that way, and get into angles that would otherwise be really difficult to get into. So like for this, I actually used a V parting tool, it's called, for to just do the general shape. And it's really just a V. Like imagine if you took a flat blade and then just bent it. But to get that sharper angle, I came back in with this tool, just to get a cleaner edge. You can also do what are called undercuts with these, where the you actually are going underneath the wood. So instead of just having it come out and then straight down, you can actually get under. And a lot of coastal carvers will do that on their totem poles just for more dimension. I was also told by someone that on some of the old poles, they would have a V, cut with something like this. They would have the V of the design, and then at the bottom they would have another one, which would just add more dimension. And you can't really get down there with a chisel to get the right angle. You have to have one of these. So it just depends on the fineness of the work you're doing, and the angle and like the space you have to work with.
Thanks for sharing that.
Different ones. This is one of my favorites for carving out the back of masks. So now that I've only started doing deeper masks since I moved down here, with the availability of this wood. And once you start getting down here, the regular size chisels are too long. So you can't get like that flat angle that you're looking for. And so once you get to that point, you can use this. Spoon carvers use blades very similar to this, and you can just get down there and you end up cutting with this round part instead of with the tip. And so you can get a cleaner cut, and just smooth out the area more. I had my buddy Sean's tools in here. He makes sets that there's one like this, and then there's 4 tools, and the last one is almost flat. Yeah, so it's just good good variety to have.
Regarding knives, Melissa asks, how often do you nick yourself? Do you have scars from all these years of carving?
I do. Actually, just recently, I said not long ago that I have to pay attention to when I should stop carving. And I was working on a piece, and I have the tendency to, like, I'll lean forward for some things and I'll put the piece on my lap and work on it. And I was leaning back, I had my knees propped up, and I was getting tired. I should have stopped. And I was trying to get this sort of odd angle, and I slipped and it went right through my jeans and I cut my leg. And it wasn't really wide, but it was pretty deep because of the angle the knife was at. So I told my family, and my mom got me, for Christmas, my parents got me a leather apron. So at least my legs are safe, but I do have some scars on my legs. I almost always get them on my hands. My friend Randy cut her this part of her thumb one time really bad. So it happens, and it can be pretty gnarly, but yeah, I cut myself a lot, Mo.
I'm glad your parents got you that apron. Important for anybody thinking about taking up carving based on this demo. Get yourself an apron.
And then actually that's part of the reason I had listed this as one of my tools. It's a super old hand towel like you hang in your bathroom. But oftentimes I'll have this on my lap or in my hand, just like one more layer of protection. Oh, sorry, I keep forgetting. So with this, I'm still just working on the outline. So I came up, so you can see I traced the outline here, and then I'm just working my way down to get the rest of that wood off. Oh, there we go.
Jen, for these smaller pieces that you make, do you like take carving around with you if you're on the go or like running errands? Is that something you would work on while sitting around, or do you really need to be in the studio?
For me, I'm just more comfortable in the studio. Although that would be a good idea. I've discovered in living in this area, you have to plan a lot more for traveling, and you might be stuck on the ferry for a little while. I have heard of carvers though who kind of just always have tools and a piece of wood on them, and when they have some time or they get bored, then they pull it out and start working. So that'll be good for now for this side. Because really this step, I just kind of want to get an idea of where I'm going to go. I can always come back and adjust some of these little areas. I'll make this a little more dented in. I'll put some more detail down here. But a lot of that's easier to do once I have this carved out. A really good piece of advice that I got. So I said I cut off about an inch and a half off the back of this. One reason to leave that on when you start is so that you have enough wood that if you make a mistake when you're carving, you can carve it off and start over. But if you get the finish depth from the beginning, you don't give yourself that wiggle room. So I'm okay just leaving some of this to work on that later. But I guess to show the face, so I've discovered it. It always seems so obvious to me how I wanted masks to look based on a 2D design. But I've discovered that that's just how my brain works. And so I was planning on showing just a little bit about how I start forming the face. So the eye area will be carved down, and then there'll be a cheek. And in this case, it'll have this fin separated. And then these little holes will be the mouth. These are teeny tiny. On a bigger mask, I could just use my tools to form those myself, but I will use, for these ones, I'll use just a drill. I have a really small, cute little, like a hobby drill that I'll use. So for this part, you have to be really careful, because if you go too far, you'll lose what will eventually be your cheek. And on bigger masks, I do this a little bit different now, but this method is how I was taught when I was in high school. So you carve down from the eyebrow ridge to where the eye is, and then you turn it around and you go the other direction. And it's really important to keep in mind that carving, most steps, or for a long time, the carving looks just kind of gnarly, because there's no detail, and that's okay. I pretty much every time I do a piece, I go through a period where I look at it and I think, this is terrible. This will never look good. And then eventually it comes around. So that's how the eye looks for now. And then I usually come in, this is a teeny tiny V parting tool. Sorry, you can't. I have an old phone. It's not the best. But what I'll do is I'll trace along this line for the nose up to where I did the eye socket. And that's just to start splitting out the cheek from the nose. Like that.
I'm going to start reading some of these questions out to you, Jen. Susie asks, wouldn't it be easier to do the fine work first and the shape afterwards? Seems like it would be easier to hold to do the fine work.
Possibly. I always just start with the outline, because that's how I was taught. We always cut out the face or the mask that we were going to do. But also I go back and forth between shaping the overall mask and going into details, because they start affecting each other. So like for this, before I had this, these whale tails in there, I did just sort of a rough shaping. So I knew generally where I wanted the curve of the forehead to be. And then as I started carving these in, I started at the bottom and did sort of rough shaping, and then came back and refined it. Then I would come back in and carve out these areas to make sure that the shape of the forehead was consistent, and it wouldn't end up all wobbly. But then the shape of the forehead also affects the shape of this eye socket here. So I do a very rough shaping of the eye socket, and then I'll start separating out the nose, and then I'll come down and take this area away, and then I start shaping the cheek. And when I get to here is when I start reshaping this eye socket. So I'm sure there are carvers who do the opposite, where they do all the details first and then focus on the outside. But I actually usually don't carve pieces this small. I've only done a couple small ones recently. So who knows, maybe I'll change my method at some point. But hopefully that sort of answers the question.
I think it does. So in terms of all the different types of masks you make and the different imagery you use, I loved that the mask that you made during this residency was inspired by a mask you made when you were a teenager, and kind of working with past ideas that had inspired you. So Angaiak Malone is curious to know what's your favorite mask that you've created, and I wonder if within that you could speak a little bit too to past work and how you kind of take inspiration from ideas that have come before as well.
Man, I don't know if I have any one favorite. I try to make each mask I do really unique. I oftentimes will take ideas from historic pieces, but I personally don't just directly copy, because those old masks were done for ceremony, and the information about what ceremony it was made for hasn't always been preserved. A lot of times people would just either buy the masks right after they were danced, or they would find them somewhere, because Yupik people traditionally disposed of all their masks when they were done. They would either just leave them on the tundra, or they would burn them. Excuse me. And so we don't always know what the ceremonies were, but we do know that some of the ceremonies were really, really powerful. And so I don't, for me personally, I choose not to take those powers. I don't want to mess with them. My words left me for a second, but so I really like experimenting and trying new things. And so for each piece I do, I try to just be really happy with the end result, and come up with something new and different. This piece that I did for the residency is the first time that I've revisited one of my own ideas. And it just seemed like a fun thing to try. I had never done it myself. And so I just wanted to do something different. But I really try to make sure that each piece stands on its own, mainly because I feel like it's how I honor my ancestors and the work that they did, the efforts they put into surviving and making sure that we got here. And so I want to make sure that I'm doing something that is respectful, and honorable in that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes wonderful sense. Thank you for sharing that. And I love what you say about, honoring your ancestors, but also wanting to be respectful of not, tapping into something that you're not specifically seeking to access, I guess is the way we might put it. So Melissa's curious, when the pandemic is over, will you be traveling back to Alaska with your family? Do you feel like your trips home inspire you and lead to new projects?
Yes, absolutely. I've lived in this area now for 6 years, and I still call myself an Alaskan. I just think there's a certain way of being and of thinking when you are from there, when you grow up there. And there's really no place like Alaska for me. I get to see family and friends. I was able to go to Tanunuk for the first time in 17 years in 2018 and bring my husband and kids with me. It was their first trip out there. And so we actually had hoped to go back out there again last summer, but of course the pandemic hit and we couldn't do that. So, and I'm itching to get back up there though, and to see everyone again and sort of feel the land. And definitely get back out to Tununic as soon as I can as well.
So you answered this a little bit earlier, Jen, but we have Kay joining us. She was having some technical difficulties getting into the talk, but she's curious where you get your wood. So you mentioned salvaging wood that falls down from around town. You have some henchmen involved in helping you find the wood. But I'm curious, like, do you ever just buy wood, or are there other ways that you get your hands on wood?
Yeah, so I've usually buy my basswood from, this actually is craft wood from either Michael's or Joann's. I can't remember which one. They sell them in little bags. And I have this habit of just seeing things and going, oh, I'm going to get that. Maybe I'll use it someday. But I usually get my basswood from Superior Hardwoods in Fairbanks. I bought it from down here and I haven't been real happy with it. And then I also buy yellow cedar from there. And then I actually just bought a bunch of red cedar and a piece of yellow cedar for another project I'm going to work on from someone down here. And it's old growth. It's, you can't just, I have some second growth red cedar that I got from a tree person who cut it down on someone's property and just posted on Craigslist. Hey, come and get this wood. But if you want old growth, which has a tighter grain and carves really nicely, it's harder. You can't just get that. Hey, buddy. My son just got home from school.
Papa's here too.
Hi there, studio elves.
Yeah, one of my little not so helpful helpers, I call them.
Jen, I wonder if you would tell us a little bit about the ways you use painting and adornment after the carving portion is complete, and kind of what are some of the more inventive materials you've used. Have you always painted your masks, or is that a new experience? Just curious, because I know some of them have really kind of fanciful additions that come after the carving process.
Yeah, so I have not always painted my masks. And I think part of that was just my aesthetic at the time. I just preferred the look of the natural wood. But also I hadn't realized when I was younger that Yupik masks were always painted a long time ago. And so it felt just sort of natural to start painting them. Obviously I don't use the old colors exclusively, so that would have been red from red ochre, so it's more of like a rusty color. Black from charcoal, white from white ochre, I think it's called. I don't know, it's like chalk clay-ish. And then blue came from a mineral called vivianite that could be ground up and mixed with oil. So now I just kind of use whatever seems to fit the mask. I view the process of creating a mask as a negotiation between me and the piece. like this was pretty unusual for me to come up with a design first and then apply it to the wood. Oftentimes I'll look at the wood first and then see kind of what comes of it. And then the finishing process is the same. Sometimes I have an idea of what I'd like to do, but other times I just sort of stare at it and see if it looks finished. So a couple of years ago, I did this piece that was a salmon with a face in the mouth. That's the yuwa, the human spirit of the fish. And I thought I was just going to leave it that way after I painted it, but when I was looking at it, it didn't really seem done. And so I eventually added some wire as the universe rings, and I had found some dyed shell beads, and I added those and I positioned them so it looked like water was flowing through them. And so for a lot of things, I have this big table that we found at a Habitat for Humanity store that a crafter at some point had owned. But it's got all these nice big drawers, and then I've got shelves of stuff. And so sometimes I'll just, if I'm feeling stuck on how to finish a piece, I'll just pull out a bunch of things and see what fits. So like, for example, I did a walrus mask not long ago, and I wasn't sure how I wanted to finish it, but it just seemed like it needed something. And so I ended up using some driftwood that I had found from this area. And so it just, I kind of, I talk about, me and the mask have conversations and we see how it wants to be finished. I actually have a piece of wood here that I colored blue a long time ago. And it hasn't talked to me in a while. So I'm just waiting to see what will happen. I use a lot of beads. I just really like beads. And I like the different finishes you can get. The different effects that you can get. So a lot of it, so every now and again, I'll have a plan ahead of time. But honestly, usually I just kind of play it by ear and see what seems right.
Thanks for sharing that. I learned, is Vivianite what you said was the blue pigment? Yeah. That's really cool. I never knew that. This is a great question from Annette, especially based on some of what you told me about kind of your early inspiration in art making was watching your grandmother weave grass baskets. So she asks if you've ever incorporated Yupik grass weaving into your masks.
Not weaving. I did. There's a really well-known set or type of mask called a driftwood spirit mask. So way back when, and today actually continues today, driftwood was a critical element of survival in the Yupik region. There aren't any big trees, and on Nelson Island, where my dad is from, there are none. And so once the sea ice went out, whenever, I think it's I'm blanking on the direction of the wind, but there's a certain wind direction that would be good for getting driftwood. And so the driftwood spirit mask would be danced to ask the driftwood to return every year. People used it for masks, obviously, but also for heating their houses, for building snowshoes and kayaks and all sorts of things. And I learned more about the importance of beach grass, it's called out there, which is what my grandma used to do her weavings. And they also had to make sure they collected enough of that, because they would they would use the grass for making bags and storage, like big storage baskets for fish, sleeping mats, socks. So in my mind, I decided I wanted to do a beach grass spirit mask. And so to finish it, I took my Auntie Anna was nice enough to mail me some grass 2 years ago now. And so I used some of that. I made sort of like this pointy hoop around it. And so I wrapped the grass around that. But I do really want to learn how to do it. I know the motions. I started experimenting a little bit, but I just need to sit down and take the time to learn that patience, I guess. It's a lot of calmness that I don't always feel. So yeah, I have the grass. I just need to figure out how to do it.
That's great. So we have one last question here, since we're getting close to the hour, and I know your kids are home from school, so I don't want to keep you carving here longer than necessary. But Kay's curious if you incorporate any other cultures besides Yupik into your masks.
I haven't up until this point. It's important to keep in mind there's all sorts of native cultures, and they all have their own regions and traditions. And there are some artists who are, sort of comfortable going back and forth, but I haven't reached that point yet. But I do, because I am on my mom's side, Irish and Italian. I've been really curious to sort of investigate the artists or art traditions from those countries. One of my dreams, and I hope it happens someday, is to go to Italy and learn more about mosaics. My husband and I went to Italy back in 2009, and when we were touring some of the old Roman ruins, I peeked into this little room that had a gate on it, and there was the most incredible black and white mosaic just propped up against the wall. And so I really, really want to learn more about that and incorporate that into future work. But so far, that's my only plan, is to kind of stick with the heritages that I'm directly connected to.
Thank you for that, Jen. So I want to make sure that we give everyone a last chance. If anyone has more questions for Jen, or Jen, if there's anything you'd like to close us out with. I know you're partially, you're well on your way with this little mask, but I know that you're not done yet. So if you want to kind of fill anyone in on next steps, or just however you want to leave it.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you everyone for taking time out of your day to join me. Sort of a carving nerd, Yupik culture nerd. I could talk about it all day. So I appreciate you letting me sort of talk your ear off. So next steps for this will be, so right now I'm shaping the mouth area. Sorry, I'm blocking the light. This side is going to be lower than this side. A lot of Yupik masks are asymmetrical. And I already carved off the mouth pattern, but it'll have some holes that look like bubbles starting from down here and going up here. So once I have that established, then I'll come in, shape the cheeks. I'll do the same thing over here for the eye that I did here. And then everything gets rounded out. So I won't leave this with this sharp edge. It'll be rounded, and then I'll do some shaping of the tail. So it looks like it's flipping one direction or another. And this is so small, I might, make it a necklace, or I have had some people ask if I would make these just as masks, just teeny tiny little bits of art you can put on your wall. So maybe I'll do that as well. But yeah, thank you everyone. I really appreciate it.
Well, actually, I'm going to interrupt you one last time, Jen, because we have a really great question, I think, for you to end on, from Fiona Peter. And she just says, what suggestions do you have for a teenager who would like to start out learning how to carve?
There is a really good book on, it's actually on carving totem poles and panels. And I can't think of it off the top of my head. I have a copy of it though, and Francesca, I can send it to you if, I'm sorry, what was her name?
Fiona Peter.
Yeah, so if she wanted to get a hold of you, she could find it. And it's actually written by a couple of non-native people, but they do a really, really good job of describing tools and their uses and how to make the cuts for, at least for panels and for totem poles. My other recommendation is to just look at as many different masks or carvings as you can. I have a whole library of Yupik culture books. Some of them are just artifacts, pages upon pages of harpoon toggles and needle cases, and all just hundreds upon thousands of items. And then a few with masks. And it really helps to just look at those as much as you can. And because you start getting a feel for the style, for the elements that are pretty common through each of the pieces. And then reading the stories, I think, always helps. My masks always have stories that go with them. And that's kind of a natural extension of my cultural heritage, and the history of masks from my region. And actually, I don't know, I don't think there's any native carvers on YouTube, but there are a ton of carvers. And Instagram as well. And there's a lot of people who are really generous in posting videos and sharing, techniques and methods to at least get started. And then once you get a feel for wood, then it kind of just takes on a life of its own. Everyone develops their own style, their own way of doing things. But learning as much as you can, just visually first.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jen. Thank you for sharing with us. You've just been such a wonderful artist to work with. And I encourage you to look at this on Facebook to just see all the love and comments from people who are tuning in, listening.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Yeah. It's been an honor.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, everyone.